Their mornings feel slow and heavy. Their legs feel weighted. Their thinking moves through fog. They wake from what should have been a full night of restorative sleep and feel exhausted before the day has even begun. And they attribute every single one of these experiences to aging. They tell themselves, well, I am over 50 now. What else should I expect? We are going to examine precisely why circulation in men over 50 becomes so critically compromised, what is actually unfolding inside your arteries during the hours you sleep, and most importantly, one remarkably straightforward nighttime practice, something you can stir right into olive oil before going to bed, that research suggests can fundamentally alter what your circulation looks like by morning. This is not folklore. This is not an ancient remedy discovered on a clay tablet. What we are going to discuss today is grounded in physiology, in vascular biology, in genuine peer-reviewed science. Stay with me, because by the time we finish, you are going to look at that bottle of olive oil sitting in your kitchen in an entirely different way. Your circulatory system is, at its core, a delivery network. Think of it as the roads and highways of an enormous city. Your heart is the engine driving all of the traffic. It beats approximately 100,000 times each day, pushing blood through roughly 60,000 miles of blood vessels, enough to circle the earth more than twice. And through those vessels, your blood carries everything your body requires: oxygen, nutrients, hormones, immune cells, and signaling molecules to every single organ, tissue, and cell in your body. When that delivery system is functioning beautifully, you wake up energized. Your mind is sharp. Your legs feel strong and capable. Your body recovers well from physical demands. Your heart does not have to fight against resistance simply to do its fundamental job. But here is what begins happening to men, particularly after the age of 50. The roads start narrowing. They become stiffer. They lose the elasticity that once allowed them to expand and contract with each heartbeat. The traffic, your blood, has to work considerably harder to reach where it needs to go. This process has a name. It is called arterial stiffness, and it is one of the most thoroughly documented, most extensively studied, and simultaneously most underappreciated contributors to declining health in aging men. A study published in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology found that arterial stiffness is an independent predictor of cardiovascular events, meaning it predicts heart attacks and strokes separately from cholesterol levels, blood pressure readings, or other traditional risk factors. It represents its own distinct category of danger, and it accelerates dramatically after the age of 50 in men. If you take nothing else from this entire video, hold on to this concept, because nitric oxide is arguably the single most important molecule for your vascular health, and almost nobody is discussing it in the terms it deserves. Nitric oxide is a gas, a tiny, simple molecule composed of one nitrogen atom and one oxygen atom. It is produced by the cells lining the inside of your blood vessels. Those cells are called endothelial cells, and the thin, continuous layer they form is called the endothelium. What nitric oxide does inside your arteries is nothing short of extraordinary. It signals the smooth muscle surrounding your blood vessels to relax. When that muscle relaxes, your arteries dilate. They widen. And when they widen, blood flows through easily, efficiently, without resistance. Blood pressure remains healthy. Oxygen delivery improves. The heart does not have to strain. During sleep, your blood pressure naturally dips, a normal and healthy phenomenon called nocturnal dipping. But in men with compromised circulation, this dip can reduce blood flow to peripheral tissues to the point where they wake with genuinely diminished circulation compared to when they went to bed. Overnight is also when inflammatory markers tend to be highest, a phenomenon linked to cortisol rhythms and immune activity that is most pronounced during the early morning hours. This is precisely why heart attacks and strokes occur most commonly between 6 and 10 in the morning. Here is something critically important that most people get wrong when purchasing olive oil. The polyphenol content varies enormously depending on how the oil was produced, how it was stored, and how old it is. Refined olive oil loses the vast majority of its polyphenols during industrial processing. Even some products labeled extra virgin can be polyphenol poor if the olives were harvested late in the season, if the oil was stored in clear bottles exposed to light, or if it has been sitting too long. What you want is an early harvest extra virgin olive oil, ideally in a dark glass bottle with a harvest date on the label, not just an expiration date. The polyphenol content of freshly harvested cold-pressed extra virgin olive oil can be 30 to 40 times higher than that of refined olive oil. When you taste a high-quality extra virgin olive oil and feel that peppery burn at the back of your throat, that is your neurological system detecting oleocanthal. The stronger that sensation, the higher the polyphenol content. That burn is not a flaw. That burn is the medicine announcing its presence. A meta-analysis published in Nutrition Journal analyzing 11 randomized controlled trials found that curcumin supplementation significantly improved endothelial function measured by flow-mediated dilation, comparable in magnitude to what you would expect from moderate aerobic exercise. Let that truly land. A dietary compound producing circulatory improvements similar in scale to exercise. That is not a trivial finding. Curcumin works through multiple vascular pathways simultaneously. It upregulates the expression of ENOS, the nitric oxide synthase enzyme responsible for nitric oxide production. It inhibits NF-κB, one of the master switches of inflammatory gene expression in your body. When NF-κB is activated, it switches on dozens of inflammatory genes simultaneously, genes that produce the cytokines that damage your endothelium. Curcumin reaches into that control panel and dials it down. It also inhibits platelet aggregation, directly improving blood viscosity and flow, particularly through small capillaries. But here is the well-known challenge with curcumin. Its bioavailability is notoriously poor. Curcumin consumed on its own is poorly absorbed by the gut. Much of it passes through without entering the bloodstream in therapeutically meaningful amounts. This is where two factors become critically important. The first is black pepper, specifically a compound called piperine. Piperine has been shown to increase curcumin bioavailability by up to 2,000%. That is not a typographical error. 2,000%. Piperine inhibits the intestinal enzymes and transport proteins that would otherwise rapidly break down and eliminate curcumin before absorption can occur. The second bioavailability enhancer is fat, and this is where the olive oil becomes not just a vehicle, but an active partner. Curcumin is fat-soluble. It dissolves in fat and is absorbed through the lymphatic system when consumed alongside dietary fat. Extra virgin olive oil provides exactly the fat matrix that optimizes curcumin absorption. So when you stir turmeric into olive oil along with a pinch of black pepper, you are not simply combining three ingredients. You are activating a synergistic absorption system that makes curcumin dramatically more bioavailable than it would ever be consumed alone. The effective dose seen in research is approximately half a teaspoon to 1 full teaspoon of turmeric powder per serving, combined with a small pinch of black pepper. Roughly 1/16 of a teaspoon, which sounds tiny, but is entirely sufficient for the piperine effect. Raw ginger powder or freshly grated ginger brings an entirely different but deeply complementary set of mechanisms to this mixture. Ginger contains a family of bioactive compounds called gingerols and shogaols, particularly 6-gingerol and 6-shogaol, that have been studied extensively for their effects on circulation and blood flow. A randomized controlled trial published in the journal Phytomedicine found that ginger supplementation significantly reduced levels of fibrinogen, that clotting protein we mentioned earlier that increases blood viscosity in aging men. Lower fibrinogen means thinner, more fluid blood that moves more easily through capillaries. Ginger also has a fascinating effect on cold-induced vasoconstriction. One of the classic signs of compromised circulation in men over 50 is that their extremities become cold easily because blood vessels constrict more readily and with greater severity than in younger men. Ginger has been shown to inhibit certain calcium channels in vascular smooth muscle, the channels that trigger that constriction. By partially blocking those channels, ginger keeps peripheral blood vessels more open and dilated even in cooler temperatures. This is why many men who incorporate ginger into their evening routine report noticeably warmer hands and feet by morning. Their peripheral circulation has literally improved overnight. There is also ginger's effect on prostaglandin synthesis. Similar to the mechanism of oleocanthal in olive oil, ginger compounds inhibit COX enzymes, reducing the inflammatory prostaglandins that contribute to platelet stickiness and vessel wall inflammation. And unlike aspirin, which also inhibits these pathways but does so irreversibly and can cause gastric damage, ginger's inhibition is gentler, reversible, and comes packaged with compounds that actively protect the gastric lining simultaneously. Use approximately 1/4 to half a teaspoon of ground ginger or about half a teaspoon of freshly grated ginger in your evening mixture. If you told most people you were stirring cayenne into olive oil before bed for your circulation, they would look at you skeptically. But the science here is remarkably solid, and the mechanism is elegant. Capsaicin activates a receptor in your body called TRPV1, the transient receptor potential vanilloid 1 receptor. This receptor is found not just in your nerve endings, but also in the cells of your cardiovascular system. When capsaicin binds to TRPV1 in vascular tissue, one consequence is the release of substance P and calcitonin gene-related peptide, neuropeptides that cause direct vasodilation. Your blood vessels literally widen in response to capsaicin activation. A study published in Cell Metabolism showed that regular capsaicin consumption was associated with significantly reduced arterial stiffness and improved endothelial function. But there is something even more specific to nighttime circulation that makes cayenne particularly valuable in this context. Capsaicin has been shown to enhance what researchers call the axon reflex, a local nerve-mediated response that causes microvascular dilation, specifically in the small vessels and capillaries of the skin and peripheral tissues. This mechanism is responsible for the warmth and flushing you feel when you eat spicy food. And when you consume capsaicin in the evening, that peripheral microvascular dilation is active during exactly the hours when your extremities are most at risk of poor perfusion. The amount you need is genuinely tiny. Just a small pinch of cayenne, perhaps 1/8 of a teaspoon or even less. More is not better here. The goal is gentle, sustained activation of those TRPV1 receptors, not a dramatic burning experience that disrupts your sleep. The primary active compound in garlic is allicin, but allicin is not actually present in whole garlic. It is produced when garlic is crushed, chopped, or chewed, bringing together an enzyme called alliinase with its substrate allicin. When those two compounds combine, allicin forms. And allicin is extraordinarily short-lived. It begins breaking down within minutes. This is why freshly crushed raw garlic, allowed to sit for approximately 10 minutes after crushing before consuming, provides the most robust allicin content. A meta-analysis of 39 randomized controlled trials published in the Journal of Nutrition found that garlic preparations produce significant reductions in both systolic and diastolic blood pressure in patients with hypertension. The proposed mechanism involves hydrogen sulfide. Garlic metabolites generate hydrogen sulfide gas in your blood vessels. And just like nitric oxide, hydrogen sulfide is a potent vasodilator. It relaxes vascular smooth muscle directly. It also carries antioxidant properties that protect nitric oxide from being destroyed by free radicals. So garlic and olive oil's hydroxytyrosol are working together to preserve the very nitric oxide that your endothelial cells are producing. Garlic also reduces platelet aggregation through a separate mechanism from ginger. It inhibits thromboxane A2, a potent platelet activating compound. When you combine ginger and garlic in this mixture, you are addressing blood viscosity and platelet stickiness through two entirely different pathways simultaneously. The optimal approach is one small raw garlic clove crushed and allowed to rest for 10 minutes, then stirred into your olive oil mixture. If raw garlic is too strong in the evening, 1/4 teaspoon of high-quality garlic powder is a reasonable alternative, though somewhat less potent. First, the absorption of fat-soluble compounds like curcumin is enhanced when the digestive system is winding down but has not yet fully slowed. The gentle post-meal digestive activity of the evening helps drive fat-soluble compound absorption without the competition of a large meal. Second, taking these compounds before sleep means their anti-inflammatory and vasodilatory effects peak during the early sleep phases, precisely when your body's own vascular repair processes are most active. The preparation is straightforward. Begin with 1 to 2 tablespoons of your high-quality extra virgin olive oil in a small glass. Into that, stir half a teaspoon to 1 teaspoon of turmeric powder, then 1/4 teaspoon of ginger powder, a genuinely small pinch of cayenne, 1 crushed garlic clove that has rested for 10 minutes, or 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder, and critically, a small pinch of black pepper. Stir everything together thoroughly and consume it directly. The texture is thick. The flavor is bold and complex, earthy, warming, gently spicy, with that characteristic olive oil fruitiness underneath. It is not a flavor experience that most people describe as pleasant the first time. But almost universally, people report adapting within a week. Many come to genuinely look forward to it. Within approximately 20 to 30 minutes of consuming the mixture, the fat-soluble compounds, curcumin riding on those olive oil fatty acids, the gingerols, the capsaicin, begin moving through your intestinal wall and into your lymphatic system. The piperine from the black pepper has already begun inhibiting the intestinal enzymes that would otherwise break them down. Allicin from the garlic and the polyphenols from the olive oil travel through the portal circulation into the liver. And by the time you are lying down and beginning to relax, these compounds are entering systemic circulation and beginning to reach your endothelial cells. As you transition into the first stages of sleep, something remarkable unfolds in your cardiovascular system. Your sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight system that keeps your vessels in moderate constriction during waking hours, begins quieting down. Your parasympathetic nervous system takes over, heart rate slows. Blood pressure drops, and your blood vessels have the opportunity to enter a more dilated, relaxed state. In a healthy vascular system, this transition is smooth and complete. But in men over 50 with arterial stiffness and endothelial dysfunction, this transition is blunted. The vessels cannot fully relax because their smooth muscle is chronically tense and their nitric oxide is insufficient. This is precisely where the compounds you consumed begin their most important work. The oleocanthal and hydroxytyrosol from the olive oil are reaching your endothelial cells and suppressing the inflammatory signaling that keeps those cells in a state of chronic stress. The curcumin is binding to NF-κB and downregulating inflammatory gene expression. The garlic metabolites are generating hydrogen sulfide in your vessel walls. The capsaicin is activating TRPV1 receptors in your peripheral vasculature. And together, all of these signals are communicating the same message to your vascular smooth muscle. Relax, open, let the blood through. During deep sleep, the slow wave stages that dominate the first half of the night, your pituitary gland releases growth hormone. This matters enormously for vascular health because growth hormone stimulates the production of insulin-like growth factor 1, which in turn supports the regeneration of endothelial cells. Your blood vessel linings are literally being rebuilt during this window. The antioxidant protection provided by hydroxytyrosol, the anti-inflammatory environment created by curcumin and oleocanthal, the enhanced blood flow through peripheral capillaries driven by ginger and capsaicin, all of that is supporting the conditions under which endothelial regeneration can happen most effectively. Then comes the second half of the night, dominated by REM sleep, when your body's cortisol begins its natural pre-dawn rise in preparation for waking. This cortisol rise is physiologically normal, but in men with chronic inflammation, it can trigger a spike in inflammatory activity during the early morning hours. The biological explanation for why vascular events cluster between 6 and 10 in the morning. The anti-inflammatory compounds still active in your system from the evening mixture provide a buffer against the most extreme consequences of that cortisol-driven inflammatory surge. The first thing most men report is warmth. Not dramatic, not startling, just a quiet, settled warmth in their hands and feet that they realize, upon reflection, had been absent for years. This is peripheral microcirculation recovering. The capillaries in the extremities that had been chronically underperfused are now receiving better blood flow. The vascular effects of ginger and capsaicin on peripheral vessels, practiced every night and accumulating across weeks, begin producing structural changes, not just acute ones. Research on capsaicin and ginger shows that their vascular benefits compound with time and consistent use, producing greater and more durable effects than single doses. The second change men commonly notice is cognitive. That dense, thick morning brain fog that so many men over 50 have accepted as the new normal begins lifting earlier and more completely. This makes perfect sense when you understand the biology. Your brain is extraordinarily dependent on microcirculation. It accounts for only about 2% of your body weight, but receives approximately 15 to 20% of your cardiac output. Every tiny capillary in your cerebral circulation matters. When those capillaries are functioning better, when the blood flowing through them is less viscous, when vessel walls are more responsive and nitric oxide is more available, the brain receives improved oxygen and glucose delivery, and cognitive function genuinely improves. Several studies on curcumin specifically have shown improvements in attention and working memory in older adults. The proposed mechanism is precisely this: improved cerebral microvascular function. The third change is energy, not a jittery, artificial energy, not the kind that collapses by mid-morning. A quieter, more sustained physical readiness. Muscles that felt heavy and uncooperative begin feeling more responsive. This is skeletal muscle microcirculation recovering. Your muscle cells depend on capillary blood flow, not just for oxygen during exercise, but for the removal of metabolic waste products, lactate, carbon dioxide, inflammatory byproducts that accumulate overnight. When circulation is compromised, those waste products sit in muscle tissue longer. When circulation improves, they are cleared more efficiently. The result is muscles that feel lighter, more capable, more awake from the first moments of the morning. The oleocanthal, the oleuropein, the hydroxytyrosol, these are the medicinal compounds, and they must be present in meaningful quantities for the vascular effects to occur. Look for monovarietal olive oils from producers who list a harvest date. Look for that peppery throat burn when you taste it. If it tastes bland and neutral, it is not doing what needs to be done. Mistake 2. Inconsistency. These compounds do not work like pharmaceutical drugs producing immediate, dramatic effects from a single dose. They work through the gradual modulation of gene expression, the slow restoration of endothelial function, the progressive reduction of chronic inflammation. A study on curcumin and endothelial function found that meaningful improvements in flow-mediated dilation required a minimum of 8 weeks of consistent daily use. This is not a one-week experiment. It is a practice. It requires commitment. The men who report the most significant changes are those who have been consistent for 30, 60, 90 days. Mistake 3. Taking the mixture in the morning instead of the evening. The instinct to feel the effects during active hours is understandable, but the most important vascular work happens overnight. You want these compounds present and active while your body is in its repair mode, not after you have already woken and are already moving. The morning is too late to influence what your overnight circulatory biology does. Mistake 4, ignoring hydration. Blood viscosity is dramatically influenced by hydration status. All the vasodilatory compounds in the world cannot fully overcome the circulatory drag of dehydrated, viscous blood. Men over 50 need to be intentional about hydration because the thirst mechanism weakens with age. A practical approach is consuming 400 to 500 milliliters of water, roughly 2 cups, about an hour before your evening mixture. This ensures your blood is well hydrated going into the overnight period. Mistake 5. combining this practice with habits that actively destroy endothelial function. Smoking is the most obvious. It depletes nitric oxide, damages endothelial cells, and increases oxidative stress at a rate that no dietary intervention can fully counteract. But less obviously, late-night high glycemic eating causes blood sugar to spike in the hours before sleep, triggering a process called advanced glycation end product formation, where sugar molecules bind to proteins and lipids in your blood vessels and make them stiff and dysfunctional. A large bowl of white rice or a plate of cookies at 10 at night is causing real measurable vascular damage that your olive oil mixture is then working to address. The post-meal walk. A study published in Sports Medicine found that a 10-minute walk after dinner produced significantly greater reductions in post-meal blood glucose and triglycerides compared to a single 30-minute walk at another time of day. Post-meal blood sugar spikes are one of the most consistent triggers of endothelial damage. 10 minutes of gentle walking after your evening meal before you take your olive oil mixture creates a dramatically better vascular environment into which those compounds are then delivered. Nasal breathing during sleep. This sounds almost too simple, but the physiology is real. Nitric oxide is actually produced in your nasal passages. Your sinuses are a major site of nitric oxide synthesis. When you breathe through your nose, you are delivering nitric oxide directly into your respiratory tract and lungs, where it is absorbed into your bloodstream and contributes to vascular tone. Mouth breathing bypasses this entirely. Men who habitually mouth breathe during sleep, and often without knowing it, are losing a significant source of nighttime nitric oxide. Simple nasal strips can restore nasal breathing and meaningfully improve overnight nitric oxide delivery. Cold to warm contrast in the morning. After your improved overnight circulation has done its work, alternating 30 seconds of cold water with 30 seconds of warm water in the shower, ending on warm, produces what researchers call a vascular pumping effect. The cold triggers peripheral vessel constriction. The warm causes vasodilation. This repeated contraction and dilation is essentially a workout for your vascular smooth muscle. Over time, it improves the responsiveness and elasticity of your peripheral blood vessels, compounding the structural improvements the nightly mixture is producing. Time-restricted eating. Finishing your last meal at least 3 hours before sleep is supported by some of the strongest evidence in vascular science. Your body produces significantly more nitric oxide during fasting states. Inflammatory markers drop. Blood viscosity improves as insulin levels fall. When you eat late and insulin remains elevated going into sleep, you suppress many of the very repair processes the overnight period is supposed to accomplish. Finishing dinner by 7 in the evening if you sleep at 10, and using your olive oil mixture as the final thing you consume creates the ideal metabolic window for overnight vascular restoration. Right now, the circulation you experience this morning is not a fixed and unalterable state. It is a dynamic, responsive biological system that is genuinely capable of meaningful improvement at any age. The research on vascular plasticity in older adults is one of the most encouraging bodies of science in all of medicine. Men in their 60s, 70s, even their 80s demonstrating measurable improvements in arterial elasticity, endothelial function, and microcirculation in response to targeted nutritional and lifestyle interventions. Not small, insignificant changes, clinically meaningful changes that translate into real differences in how they feel, how they move, and how clearly they think. That is the practice. That is the science. And for men over 50 whose circulation has been quietly declining for years, that small and deliberate act before bed may be the single most important thing they do for their vascular health all day. Your circulation does not have to be what it was yesterday morning. 30 days from now, if you have been consistent, your body will tell you something that no blood test, no clinical appointment, and no number on a scale can fully capture. It will tell you through the warmth in your hands when you wake up, through the clarity in your mind before your first cup of coffee, through the lightness in your legs when you stand from bed, that something quietly and without drama has genuinely changed. That is the power of understanding your own biology. That is the power of working with your body instead of simply watching it age. And that is exactly what you now have the knowledge to do. I am Dr. Eric Berg. Take care of your health. I will see you in the next one.